Hi, everyone, and welcome to the FCI podcast. It's a new series we're doing, and I'm here to actually give you guys an insight into the FCI, to understand what the FCI is, how it works, by speaking to some crucial people within the FCI, some people that will hopefully shed some light and clarity on the issues that I'm trying to bring up. And today it's my honor to have the FCI Executive Director, Mr. Yves de Klerk, with us, and to answer a host of questions that I have, that burning questions I'm sure that many of you have and never had the opportunity to ask. So I have that privilege today. Hi, Yves. Welcome to our interview. How are you?
Hi, Gopi. I'm fine. I would be happy to kill this fire and give the most appropriate answers as possible.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Yves. So let's jump straight into it, Yves. Maybe, as I mentioned, the aim of this series is to give people a better understanding of the workings of the FCI, how things work within the FCI, the different areas. And today, obviously, we're concentrating on the FCI office and that. But before we go there, maybe could you tell us a little bit about the role of the FCI? What is the FCI and what is its role as far as in your definition?
Yeah, of course. I think that our role is clearly defined in our statute, and I do believe that we have to stick to that. Our role has been, is, and will always be to encourage and to promote the breeding, the registration, and the use of pedigree dogs.
Excellent.
In order to do so, we have different means and tools and different ways of action, like the organization of shows, of sport and working events. We foster the exchange of information from all kinds between our members.
Yeah.
It can be scientific, sportive, administrative, zootechnical, zoobiological, etc. And all these means put together contribute to selecting the best possible sires and dams that will be able to secure a healthy future of the different breeds that we recognize.
Perfect.
That is mostly for the FCI and as a very theoretical role, what we can put on paper, what you can read on paper. Now, regarding our office and our staff, our staff is dedicated to all the administrative tasks that derive from the work done by our different stakeholders. As you know, we have in the FCI different stakeholders, and if I could sum them up, I would say that we have, first of all, our members and contract partners, which are the national canine organizations, or NCOs as we call them.
Yeah.
And then we have some working commissions, which are mostly all the commissions dedicated to shows, to show judges, to retrievers, to breeding, to standards, to scientific, to legal issues. Well, we have approximately 25 different commissions which work on a regular basis and which report on their activity to the General Committee, which makes the decisions. We also have some specific committees working and which we consider as our important stakeholders. Of course, let's say indirect stakeholders are the breeders,
okay,
because we have no direct contact with the breeders, but through their membership with our NCO, they are indirectly linked to the FCI, and we consider them as stakeholders, definitely.
Okay, so let me just pause you there for 1 minute, Yves. So what you're saying is that basically the FCI comprises of these 99 members, and these members represent national kennel clubs, and they are the members of the FCI, and it's them that have membership with the FCI. So you deal with the NCOs, which are the national canine organizations, which are the national clubs, and they then deal with their members on the specific issues. Is that a correct understanding of how that works?
Absolutely. Okay. This will deserve further development later on if you want.
Yes.
But that is really a basic principle that we deal with matters involving our members directly. And if there are issues with breeders, with exhibitors, or with any other stakeholders, usually we would refer these stakeholders to our members, because that is actually an internal or domestic issue, and we basically have no real jurisdiction on that.
Excellent. Okay, we will go into that a little bit later, but I just wanted to stress that because that is one of the things that people always misunderstand with the membership of the FCI. The FCI office specifically deals with 99 countries, and they are the members of the FCI.
That is something important, yes, And regarding the role of the FCI staff, as you asked at the beginning, well, mostly I would say that we have a department running all the accountancy, which means the accountancy for the staff and the accountancy with our members. On a personal level, I also have to manage my team here, of course, and then my team is mostly dedicated to processing show results. Confirming all the titles of champion, confirmation or working champion. We, of course, register kennel names. We have a huge international kennel name directory, which is updated daily. We accept the requests or the applications from our members to have new kennel names, and we must accept them and then feed them into our computer and in our directory. A major part of our work is also to translate all kinds of documents. We have 4 official languages, so of course we have to translate all kinds of documents, breed standards, regulations, instructions, circulars, etc. We have to make all that available to our members, and of course we have to provide all the information which result from this translation to our members. This can also be instructions for meetings, the agendas, the circulars, etc. It is important that the flow of information goes smoothly, so that our members, our commissions, our committees are perfectly informed about what a meeting is about, when the meeting will be held, and what topics will be discussed.
Perfect.
As you can see, it's a very wide concept, and there are many more tasks generated by our roles and responsibilities, but it would take years.
Now that we've touched on that, let's talk about your specific role. I mean, you're the executive director of the FCI. Could you tell us a bit about that and what that role entails? On a more personal point of view, I would say that I have a 3-facet role. One of them, the first one, which comes across my mind, is to manage the FCI staff and the FCI bank account. That is really a daily business. It's my staff, it's my team. I consider them as nearly as my second family, because it's a very reliable and a very long-standing staff. So we have managed to establish very close relations, still remaining their boss, but very long, faithful members and loyal members. The bank account, of course, is something which is absolutely essential, and I've always been very thankful to the General Committee for the trust placed in me in managing these bank accounts, because it could become a touchy issue anytime, because, as you know, when there is money at stake, there is always mistrust and there are always questions. So it is really important for me to manage the bank accounts and the accountancy in the most transparent possible way. Absolutely.
Another important part of my role, a second part of it, as I said earlier, to manage all the information, the communication, the paperwork that we have to send to the FCI members and the contract partners. So I've already developed that a little bit earlier. And the last part, which is very important for me, is to kind of administer the executive and the general committees and the General Assembly. It means that to prepare the agenda, to be absolutely aware and fully informed about all the topics on the agendas of those 3 important committee. These are really the leading bodies of the FCI, and it is important that we here at the office, and me in particular, are fully informed about what we are talking about.
Could I just stop you there for a minute, Yves? Maybe for the benefit of our listeners, you mentioned the executive committee, you mentioned the general committee, and then the General Assembly. Could you just briefly tell people what these are? I mean, I know what they are, you know what they are, but to explain to people how what they are and how they function within running the FCI, because I mean, effectively, you have the role of a CEO of the FCI. I mean, in let's talk about marketplace terms, but obviously your role is a little bit more different because you've got these different bodies to answer to, if I may use that word. So could you just tell briefly what the executive committee is, the the general committee and all that sort of things?
Yes, of course. Well, as in any big organization, the supreme body, the one that really has the highest authority, is the General Assembly.
Okay.
Our General Assembly is made up of all our members. They can be contract partners or full members or associated members. But of course, only full members have the right to vote, and there are about 75 countries.
Okay.
The 75 countries are the only ones that have the right to elect the members of the General Committee. They have the right to elect where the World Dog shows will take place. They have the right to approve the accounts, to ask any question about the accounts, and they also elect members of our mandatory commissions.
Okay.
So definitely this General Assembly is the highest body of the FCI. There is no question about that. Now to run the daily business of the FCI, we have the General Committee.
Okay.
And the General Committee are elected by the General Assembly. They include 9 members. 6 members are elected by the General Assembly directly, and the remaining 3 members are elected by their respective section.
Okay.
So we have 6 people elected by the General Assembly. Then we have 1 representative from Europe. We have 1 representative from America, to say briefly, and 1 representative from Asia, Africa, and Oceania. So that's a total of 9 people really running the FCI on a daily basis under my not supervision, under my assistance or under my guidance or whatever. I am the one to provide all information that they will have to deal with, and so that they can make the most appropriate decisions.
So they're a board of directors, so to speak. I mean,
that's it. We call it General Committee, but it's as usual, and as you have in most companies, it's the board of directors.
Okay.
And then from this board of directors, you have a smaller version, which is called the Executive Committee,
okay,
which we call in our terminology, which we sometimes refer to as the board of the FCI. And these are 3 members of the General Committee, which is president, vice president, and treasurer. And of course, this Executive Committee has the right to take any decision which has to be taken in emergency, in case of urgent cases. And we cannot have the whole General Committee meeting or discussing, because we must make the decision by the next day, or because it's a legal case and the lawyers wait for a fast answer. In that case, the Executive Committee has really the power to say, okay, we take the decision and we will inform the General Committee right afterwards.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And how often do the General Assembly, we know, meet every second year?
Correct.
How often does the board of directors meet, or the General Committee meet? And what about the executive? What's the sort of involvement on their part?
The board of directors meets before the pandemic. The board of directors was meeting 2 to 3 times a year.
Okay.
And the executive committee approximately the same number of times, depending on the agenda, on the points to discuss. But as per our statutes, it is a minimum of 2 meetings a year. So definitely, anyway, when there is a General Assembly, there would be 3 meetings of the board of directors. Absolutely, it is absolutely unavoidable, because there is far too much on the agenda. With the pandemic, and even though our statutes have not yet been adapted, with the pandemic, the General Committee, the board of directors met more often, more frequently.
Okay.
Because we have shorter meetings in order to keep the attention of everyone for a couple of hours. We cannot have face-to-face meeting. We can run face-to-face meetings for 2 days, but when it comes to online meetings, it's really difficult to capture and to keep the attention of everybody for hours and hours. And then on top of it, we must find appropriate time slots for all of us, because we have people like you who live so far from Europe, copy. I mean, East Asia, and then we also have people from the American continent, from Argentina or from Mexico. So to find a slot, a time slot which is really convenient, or more or less convenient to all of them, is not that easy. That's why we had more meetings, but they were much shorter.
Excellent. And can you tell me, Yves, how long you've been in this role as executive director? Or how long have you been with the FCI, and how that came about?
I'm not sure I want to tell you, but if I am forced, it will really make me feel how old I am now. So, but I will do that for you and for the people, for our audience. I started working for the FCI in 1994 That is 27 years now. And I just started as an employee. As very fast, I became the assistant to the past Secretary General, Mr. Van Hel. And I've started traveling with him, and I learned under him. And I just took over in '98 when he quit. And so that's, as you can see, it's been quite some time since I started now.
Quite a journey. So you came ground up, so to speak, learned from, came bottom up in terms of learned the ropes from someone who was more experienced there. And then, when you took over the reins, it was easier. I'm never easy, I'm sure. With you.
Never.
So Yves, just to sum up, you are basically a key person in terms of keeping the FCI running, because you are managing the day-to-day. And although you've mentioned meetings with the executive board and the general committee, but at the same time, I'm sure there's a lot of communication that goes on a daily basis with emails and so on with these members, and you're the person that's managing all that, keeping all that in check. Is that a sort of accurate summary of what you do in terms of making sure the FCI office runs on a day-to-day basis, and we still have, and it still exists?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. That's a big part of when I arrive here in the morning, the first thing when I open my email is first to say, wow, so many people turning to the FCI on a private basis, on the National Kennel Club basis, on the committee basis. It can go in all senses, in all directions. It's really, really impressive. We have one basic principle. It is that normally we do not deal with requests from private individuals, okay, unless they are very easy ones. Can we have the breed standard of the year 1974 for the Golden Retriever? If we have it on file, of course, we will send that. Okay. A major challenge is to never put our members in a delicate position, and it's a kind of smelling the questions that we may have. Sometimes some questions are really, so to speak, dubious, and you know beforehand that the answer you will give will be used against our National Kennel Club. Right. And the problem is that we only have one version of the story. We have the version of the Kennel Club only, or we have the version of the breeder or the exhibitor only. And that is where our role is difficult, because it's a real challenge. We really must be careful when we answer, or at least we must try to get a full picture of the issue before we give an answer. So either we answer directly to the individual person writing to us, copying our member in question, can be the French Kennel Club, the Belgian Kennel Club, so that they're absolutely informed about what we have answered to one of their members. Or we turn to that member and we say, look, this is a message we get from one of your members, a breeder or whatever. And before answering, or unless you want to answer yourself, but if we are to answer, we would like to have more information about that case, because it looks a bit special, or it looks a bit too serious, or it looks silly, or it looks whatever it looks. So it's a real challenge to never put anyone in a delicate position, but still to remain honest and to play our role, which is to give accurate information. And if rules are rules, and sometimes our kennel clubs, we must be honest enough and humble enough to recognize that sometimes there are failures from our national kennel clubs and from the office also. And sometimes we must tell the individual people, yes, you are right, and our kennel club should rectify and correct the situation, because you have been treated wrongly.
Okay, excellent. Can you tell me a little bit about the FCI office, where it's located, why it's located there? I know that's a bit historical, but I'm sure that's of interest, because a lot of people don't realize where the FCI office is actually located.
Yeah, when the Belgium is one of the founding members of the FCI back in 1911, and in the very original statutes, there was a ruling or an article requiring that the offices of the FCI would be the offices, or would be the house of the Secretary General. That means that from the very beginning, the Secretary General had to be Belgian, and the offices had to be in his house. So you have seen the shortcut.
Yeah.
The offices of the FCI were to be in Belgium.
Yeah.
I'm very happy, because otherwise I might not be here today. So it's been historically like that, and until early 50s, the offices were in the house of the Secretary General, but most real activities and daily activities were held in the offices of the Belgian Kennel Club. So one of the founders of the FCI. And so they were sharing their tasks, and the Secretary General was working from his home, writing some letters, but a lot of the job was done from the offices of the Belgian Kennel Club at that time. And then in the early 50s, in 1953, if I'm not mistaken, the then Secretary General, who was Charles Jean Debiens, and who had a function here in the city of Troyes, I think he was mayor, just decided to move the office from his home and from the headquarters of the Belgian Kennel Club, and to move everything and all the activities here in the city of Troyes, where he was living.
Okay.
Well, for obvious reasons, he was living here, so it was easier for him to work from here, and it would allow him also to have people from the city to work here in the office. So we hired the offices from 1953 until 94, it's approximately 40 years. And then in 1994, we have acquired offices in the city of Troyes still. And we have also extended the offices twice, in 2000 and in 2015. And Troyes is a small city, about 10 to 15,000 people, and we are located 75, 80 kilometers south of Brussels.
Okay.
Well, it is for us important. It is for us absolutely essential that we have our own offices. We are more than 100 years now. We are 110 years.
Yes.
110 years. And we could not keep renting an office. I actually started the year my predecessor bought our original headquarters, and so I stayed in them for 1 or 2 years, and then I was so happy that I was asked to supervise all the first extension and everything. But it's been really an interesting job, and we are very happy now. And I dare say that we have really excellent offices here, perfectly suited for what we have to do. We are, of course, so to speak, far from Brussels. As I said, about 75 or 80 kilometers. But the thing is that you must understand that the FCI offices are purely an administrative office. Right. And so the only visits we get are from time to time presidents or representatives of our national canine organizations. Or we had 1 or 2 or 3 meetings of the General Committee. But for the rest, we hardly have visits, and theoretically, we are not really open to the public. So it's really not a big inconvenience to have our offices far from Brussels. But on the other hand, it's much easier for all the staff, because the access is very easy, because mobility inside the city is much easier too. And of course, in terms of salaries, it's different, because as in most countries, salaries in the capital city are always a bit higher. Yeah. And so that's been something that was also taken into consideration, I guess, when the office was moved from Brussels to Troyes.
What's the total staff force? How many members of staff do you have there? And principally, what are their, I mean, I know there's, to go into each person's role is difficult, but in general, what's the role of the staff in supporting you and those working at the FCI office?
It can really vary. We have a real basis of 11, 12, 13 people working daily for the FCI. Okay. But I can have 1 or 2 extra person working depending on mostly on the amounts of the volume of show results that we have to process. We are still in the process of trying to digitalize and modernize the show process results. Right. It's a fight between keeping everybody on board here, because there is job for everyone, are digitalizing and running the risk to have to tell 2 or 3 persons from the staff, thank you very much, but now everything is done by the computer. So I really try to find a balance between these two aspects, being aware that we have to modernize, but personally being a little bit reluctant to tell people, thank you for having served us for 10 years, and now your mission is over because we have given you a task to a computer. But the basis is about 13 people to deal with all the work we have here.
Okay. And they're managing all these certificates, issuing of all these.
They are distributed by departments. We have one person taking care of all the title of international champion, and she prints approximately, in normal years, that means without pandemic, between 8,000 and 9,000 titles of international champion a year.
Wow.
That is a huge department. Then we have our show departments where we get also in normal years, we get the results of approximately 1,250 shows yearly and approximately 2,000 working or sporting events. So all the results of these events are sent to the FCI office and are processed at the FCI office. We have a kennel name register department with approximately 23,000 kennel names to accept yearly. And then the rest is, like anywhere, we have the breed standards and all translations department. We have an IT department. We have a rather administration and accountancy department.
Okay.
So we are divided in several departments, and all the staff is kind of interchangeable. I mean, there is a backup for everyone, of course, and if one is not there, another one can replace him or her.
Okay. Could you, just moving on, could you tell us a little bit? I mean, I know we touched on it at the beginning, but could you tell us a little bit about the relationship between the FCI and the NCO and how the functions differ? Although we're partners, or they're members of the FCI, but how the roles differ?
Yeah, well, mostly as you have understood, our main tasks are translation, administering papers and documents, and processing show results and homologating titles of international champion. That is our main business and our main tasks daily. While I do believe that our NCO's core business is to issue pedigrees. That's really, for me, the big difference. Our main source of incomes would come from the shows, and the main source of incomes for our kennel clubs would come from the pedigrees. So the core business, so to speak, because I don't like to talk as businesses, but still the core business is the shows for us and show processing.
Right.
And for the NCOs, it's rather based on issuing pedigrees and export pedigrees. And of course, there are common interests, like they have a show and sports events department. They probably have a kennel name departments, but basically their work is rather different from ours. Okay,
so they would be dealing directly with the membership and more in terms of registration and producing of pedigree certificates, whereas the FCI is issuing titles, but international titles rather than domestic titles, won for national champions and things like that. What is the most common misconception about the FCI? I mean, now that we're talking about the separation of roles and understanding that, what's one of the most common misconceptions about the FCI?
I see 2 or 3 real misconceptions which are really sometimes annoying or which make us waste a little bit of our time. And right. One of them, as I said earlier, is that people do not always realize that the FCI does not issue pedigrees.
Okay.
This concerns mostly non-FCI breeders, so to speak. And I would then refer to English or American breeders who are very often turning to the FCI asking for a copy of their pedigrees or asking for their pedigrees to changed into their name because they are not indicated as the new owner or things like that.
Right.
That's something that must be clear, and it's on our website under the most frequently asked questions section. We do not issue pedigree, so we always have to tell, sorry, please turn to the National Kennel Club of the breeder, because they are the organization that will issue the pedigrees of your dogs.
Absolutely.
That is one thing. Then on another note, I also have been realizing for years and years that the breeders, exhibitors, the public generally, and sometimes even some of our kennel clubs, they do believe that the FCI is the police of the national canine organizations. That means that individuals will turn to us and say, oh, the president is this, oh, the shows, the results at that show were already fixed before. Oh, I got my pedigree, but it's not correctly done. And of course, it's always like this in that country. I've asked my pedigree for 6 months and I still don't have it. And anything like that, that's the kind of thing we get daily. And they always believe that the FCI will interfere, but these are really domestic matters. I mean, if people think that the president of the NCO is corrupted, they have their internal bodies. They have a general assembly, they have a disciplinary commission, and the time where everything was in the hands of one single person is over. And if there is really something which is going wrong in the kennel club, there are enough bodies in that kennel club to try to find out what happens and punish possibly the person who is responsible for that, for the troubles. Right. So that is a principle that we really try to observe and to which we really stick, is that each national kennel club must retain its autonomy, and the FCI will not interfere in that kind of conflict. Now, of course, if I will just mention 2 examples, which by at random, if Belgium would say, the Belgian Kennel Club would say, oh, the French Kennel Club is not acting according to the FCI regulations. In that case, the FCI General Committee or the FCI General Assembly or the FCI Executive Committee, depending on the mistake, would interfere, because that would be an issue between 2 members of the FCI based on non-observance of our regulations. And in that case, we would therefore interfere.
Right. But generally, national kennel clubs organize their affairs, and they are responsible for that. The FCI does not police or interfere with the running. So basically, the running of a national kennel club comes to that country and the rules and regulations that govern that country, rather than FCI rules. And FCI doesn't go in or can't go in and say to them, you need to do this, unless it's a breach of an FCI statute that governs everyone.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Guppy. You're absolutely right. And that's why, as I said at the beginning of our chat, it's always a bit delicate to answer this kind of private, complaints or whatever, because as I said, our national kennel club, and as you said, our national kennel clubs have their own regulations, and I would say 99% of the cases, these internal regulations help fix the matter that we are being communicated. So I will not concede that from time to time we turn to the member and say, well, we have serious doubts about that question. Is it really so that X or Y or Z acted like that, or that your national kennel club really didn't allow that to happen, or that you did not allow that mating? But we would never make a firm decision saying you must do it like that before we get the answer or the comments or the version of our national kennel club. But we can, of course, sometimes put a bit of pressure on our national club and say, and just say, well, here is what we have received. Your feedback would be highly appreciated. Yeah. But again, the final word will be for the national kennel club and not for the FCI.
Sure. So, I mean, if it's, for example, let's just give an example. For example, if there was a breach of a color that was registered that is not FCI recognized. So those are sort of issues that maybe the issue I could ask a national kennel club to look at if there was a mistake in stating that color, because it's not a recognized color of the FCI, for example. So that would be an issue where the FCI could get involved. But other than that, on issues or on why I've not been issued this or why I'm not getting this, it actually goes back to the national kennel clubs to resolve, or the members of that country to resolve with their national body. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Anyway, when it comes to issues, it would usually be between people, private, personal conflict. And after 21 years, I can humbly say I kind of smell it, and I would really keep my hands off that kind of thing. But of course, if a country says, if a breeder says, my dog was registered as I don't know, or they have registered, even though it would be against a breeder against another breeder, but they would say, they have accepted to register that dog, which is absolutely not recognized by the FCI. Yeah, we would interfere, because it is our right to tell our members, you have registered a breed which is not FCI registered, and you are using the FCI logo without indicating that the breed is not recognized by the FCI. For example, this party color curly dog from France, for example, which everybody assimilates to a Harlequin poodle or multi-party color poodle. The French were very clear. The French told us, we do not want that breed to be called a poodle.
Yeah.
And so we have issued circulars about it. The French have recognized that breed on a totally separate basis. It's called, as I said, the petit chien particolore frisé in French. So, of course, if we are aware that a country registers or enters such dogs in their shows and indicates them in the catalog as particular poodles, it is our role to tell the country, you cannot do that. And we cannot just close our eyes because it's a principle of non-interference. In that case, we have to interfere because it is against our regulations. And we have, on paper, we know exactly what is written in the catalog. So it is our duty to interfere. Otherwise, we are here for nothing.
Yeah. So in sort of preserving the breed standard, I mean, to make sure that the breed standard is, preserved and people are not creating new breeds or putting them in others, or inventing colors that are not recognized by the in the original breed standard, and to maintain the breed standards, to do that. Now we talked a little bit about registering. We talked a little bit about dog shows. It is often assumed that these are the two main things the FCI does, but could you touch a little bit on the other, other disciplines that the FCI promotes and is involved with, because people don't know about these. I mean, there are many, and I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, first of all, let's say the truth. There is one fact which is unquestionable. Our main source of financial incomes comes from the shows, confirmation shows. And that's probably why we are considered, or we are regarded as a confirmation show organization. But as you know, our motto is for pedigree dogs worldwide. And pedigree dogs does not mean only pedigree with a good phenotype, which are beautiful dogs that can be shown. It also means pedigrees which dogs which are healthy and which are really able to perform the tasks for which they were created.
Right.
I was referring earlier today to this 1,250 shows, but also, as I said, 2,000 trials.
Wow.
So trials are for us really important. They do not bring as much money because the way we bill these events is totally different. So in terms of finances, it is really, the impact is really less. But in terms of volume and in terms of working and in terms of philosophy and in terms of image, it is for us very important. We do not only want beautiful dogs, we want also to have dogs which are able to really work. And that is the reason why we have so many working commissions, which are dedicated to many, many different disciplines, which can be working disciplines like all the hunting. We have a specific commissions for the Earth Dogs Commission. We have a commission for retrievers. We have a commission for spaniels. We have a commission for sighthound races. We have a commission for obedience. We have a commission for agility. We have commissions for herding dogs. We have a commission for sledge dogs. So we really try to cover all the important working and sporting aspects in which dogs are involved.
Excellent.
And of course, we have also other mandatory commissions like Standards Commission or Scientific Commission.
Okay.
But their role is different. It's not.
Yeah.
really focused on the work of the dogs.
The FCI is not just concerned with conformation dog shows, but sporting dogs in terms of sledding, obedience, agility, mondering, all these other things, even grooming. I mean, that's the latest commission. So covering all aspects of pedigree dogs and people's interest in pedigree dogs and those things. But can we clarify one thing? Does the FCI organize World Dog Shows?
No, well, as you have heard, we employ approximately 12 to 13 or 14 people, and it is, and we are all located here in the area of Troyes. So it would be really difficult to organize a World Dog Show. We have helped the Belgian Kennel Club organizing the centenary show in 2011. Some of my staff was detached to Brussels and helped our sponsor at that time and our Belgian Kennel Club organize a very specific event, which was called the Champion of Champions. But it is not our main type here at the office, so we do not directly organize dog show, but we rather commission our members, our national kennel clubs, to do so by means of vote at the General Assembly. Means that, for example, for the year 2025, maybe 5 countries would be interested in organizing the World Dog Show. So they have to file a very complete application file, which they have to remit to the General Assembly and to the Assembly Committee, which they have to defend before the General Assembly, trying to convince the General Assembly members to say, okay, vote for us because we have all the assets and we have all the things that one could look for and one could expect from a World Dog Show. And then, of course, after the presentations, there is a vote from as I told you, these are 75 members. And well, the best wins, as simple as that. The application files are really complete. I mean, our applying countries are really asked many details about the number of hotels, the capacity of the halls, the size of the rings they have in mind, the heating system or not heating system, the access to the countries, the specific laws regarding dogs entering the country, if there is any quarantine, if there is any other restriction, what kind of hotels, what parking lots, where will the cars will be able to park, how the staff will manage the access to the show itself. It's really 6 or 7 pages long, and it is something that we take very seriously because the interest of our readers is of course, the readers is of course essential.
Essentially, it's like you not franchise, but you sort of lease out for them to run this event under the auspices of the FCI, but it's run by the Kennel Club, which has successfully won the bid to host, just like the Olympics, I guess, where there is a host nation, and they would have to follow the rules and regulations given by the FCI in terms of all these aspects to make sure that, safety and security and all this ring sizes and, people to stay and all that, but it's run by the National Kennel Clubs. And this is the same for section shows as well. The FCI keeps a tab, but the section shows still are run by the individual countries.
Absolutely. Of course, with such huge mass event, there are issues at every World Dog Show, every section show. There are some shortcomings, there are some failures, but it would not be because we have not tried to prevent this kind of incident to happen. We really do our best. We really require highest quality from our members when they apply to host those dog shows. But that's it. With 20,000 dogs and 50,000 exhibitors or spectators in total, you cannot expect that everything goes absolutely smoothly. Yeah. And yearly we have issues. We know it. We try to learn from our lessons, and we just try to improve all the time. And this checklist is being fed, I would say, and is being extended nearly yearly because yearly we find out, we may also include that point in the points to be checked before applying, etc.
Okay, just moving on. There are only 4 official languages the FCI for an organization that has 99 members from across the globe. Why is this so? Or can you give us a bit of the background behind the 4 languages? And
Yes, I can. Well, I think a major aspect of it is financial. I mean,
okay.
We cannot run an organization like the FCI with its incomes. We cannot have 25 different languages, because that would be the approximate number of languages that would be necessary for everybody really to understand. We are a global organization, and of course we try to find common denominator.
Yes.
And these 4 languages are considered to be a common denominator because they would cover most of our countries. I mean,
yeah.
in terms of countries, of course, Spanish is spoken by many countries in the FCI. English, which is the most famous or the most common language, is spoken actually by maybe 4 or 5 countries, not more, but all as native language. But all countries nearly speak English.
Yes.
And actually, the paradoxical thing is that the founding language of the FCI, which is French, is now spoken by only 2 countries. It should actually be Belgium, half of Belgium, France, and Monaco.
Right.
No other country, and Morocco. No other country speaks French or understands French. Yeah. And the last is German, because German is really a big block too. The whole Central Europe and Mid-Europe, Central Europe, Eastern Europe speaks German, so it is essential. So the 4 languages that were chosen really cover the most linguistic interests of the world. And it started we still have French because historically French is the founding language of the FCI. That's why we keep it. Spanish has been added after, if you read the minutes of the previous General Assemblies back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there have been several attempts from Spain, from Spanish-speaking countries, so to have Spanish recognized as an official FCI language, because of course, as years were passing by, we had more and more Hispanic countries in the FCI, and they just felt the need to express themselves in the most appropriate way and to understand in the most appropriate way. So finally, after several attempts, Spanish was accepted as an official FCI language. Now to my friends from China or Russia, for example, of course, that will be the most spoken language in terms of individuals.
Right.
But as you can imagine, to add these 2 languages with a very specific alphabet, which is different from our Roman alphabet, right. Really would mean a headache. And don't forget that every time when any translation process requires a lot of time and a lot of precision. Yeah. And if we have these 2 languages, I'm not sure how to run it. It's really so you to run the FCI with 4 languages.
You can't rely on Google Translate, because you have to get the correct essence of the translation.
Absolutely. So I could find staff here, of course. I could find Russian and Chinese-speaking staff speaking here, but they must be familiar with the dog world. We would have to cross-check all our translation with Russia and China, for example.
Yeah.
And so that would mean that would boil down to delaying even more the publication of documents, because we would have to wait for Russia to tell us, yes, it's correct. No, we would like to change that term by that term. And believe me, by experience, I know how it goes. And even in very common languages like English, sometimes, it takes 1 month because there are 5 words in it and there are 10 people to decide. And so one says, no, I want with an X, I want with a Y, I want with a Z. and so it really takes time to publish it. So even with 4 languages, it's already very difficult. So that's it. So to your question, why 4 languages? I would say, why not 4 languages?
I like that. You're asking the interviewer back question. That's good. All right, Yves, 21 years at the FCI. Do you see it as an evolving organization? Has it changed? And if so, how? And do you think the FCI is better understood now globally by people? Do they know what the FCI is?
27, not 21.
Oh, 27. Wow. Okay.
94.
That was your age. 27. Sorry. I was on your age. That's why I got mixed up.
Of course. I do believe that well, we had no other choice than to modernize. And we are not the most modern organization, and we are not the fastest organization, because we remain a rather heavy machinery. But
Right.
still, we have really entered the era of digitalization and of communication by email, and not specifically having physical meeting to make decisions. So our process for making decisions has been really made more flexible, and it's much faster than before. And well, some figures could really illustrate the fact that instead of evolution, I would rather talk about a real revolution in the FCI, because
Excellent.
when I started 27 years ago, we were approximately 75 members in the FCI, and we have now come to 99 countries. So that's
Wow.
nearly 25% of increase. We had a step of 8 or 9 people. We are now, as I said, 12 to 14, or sometimes even 12 to 13, or sometimes 14 people. So in terms of growth, I mean, it is very clear that we have grown. Of course, this growth implies or requires that we adjust our tools, that we adjust our communication to the new needs that are created by this growth. And I really and humbly believe that we are on the right tracks, even though there is always room for improvement. And some of our members are much more advanced in terms of technology or digitalization than we are. But we must think globally. And it's no use to implement tools that some of our members will take another 15 years before they're able to use them. And so we can, well, we must be closer to the locomotive than to the last wagon.
Yes.
That is absolutely clear. And ideally, we should be the locomotive of the train. But if we are the locomotive of the train, we may lose members, because they will say, sorry, if you impose that kind of modern technology, we have to quit, or we cannot follow. So we must really think globally. And that's what we try to do. And in terms of image and impact, etc. Well, I will not. It will not be a scoop if I tell you that for the last 20 years, 15 years, social media and all these things have really taken a much bigger role and a much bigger space in our daily life and in our professional lives. And the FCI is of course impacted by that. And we had to adjust to this new fact, because it's a daily reality that people talk about the FCI daily on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on whatever. So we had to be able to react and to be able to interact with these people. Even though as I said, we cannot communicate really daily with these people, because our real members are the National Canine Organization. But again, we cannot left all these people unattended. So the last year we have definitely and intensively developed all our public relations department, always being very cautious to keep a good balance between contact with individuals and contact with National Canine Organization. That's a point we have discussed several times now. But we are active on social media. We are active on any possible digital tools in order to reach the bigger possible audience. And the work that has been done lately is really paying off now, and it really has good results.
Excellent. And my final question is, what are some of the areas you would like to see better utilized or understood about the FCI, and how can that strengthen the vision and mission statement, of the organization, which is for pedigree dogs worldwide?
Well, as I say, I think that I admit that I'm quite happy that with the image that we are reflecting now in social media within our National Canine Organization, even though, as I said, I think that there is always room for improvement. We give the image of a professional and reliable and long-standing, strong, reliable organization. But still, one of the points where we can really improve is still to improve that balance in our relations between all our stakeholders in order to try to never make anyone unhappy about the way we communicate. But communication is really difficult, and every word has to be thought and weighed very carefully before we publish it. Yeah. An area where we have to, I don't know how we can do it. An area where we have to improve is to be able to engage morally, professionally, and to engage even more than it is the case now, our members. Wow. When we launch projects, when we ask for information, when we ask for help, we sometimes do not reach our target. And we have to admit that while we would expect that 80% of our members would answer to a very important inquiry, we lately had the inquiry about BOAS, for example, where there was an uproar among breeders, there was an uproar among kennel clubs. But when you turn to the kennel clubs and you ask them, would you please give us that information, that information, that information? When you get 25% out of 100% of answers, you feel a little bit, unhappy. And you also have to admit, okay, we probably failed somewhere to underline the importance of this survey. Because as the Belgian motto says, union makes strength. And with the number of challenges that our national clubs are facing today, all these anti-breeding propaganda, all these anti-dog legislations, etc., all the single cases that we have to deal with, etc., at court, in the press, wherever, the more we are together to provide assistance, to provide guidance, to provide answers to those problems, because a single country has been facing that problem and can help another country. I do believe that we must be more federative than we are. And we have to recognize that if we don't have 80% of the countries answering very critical issues, it's our mistake, or not mistake, but we must improve that part of our job. And we must make understand that if I take a country, Malaysia, for example, needs real help from the FCI because they have a very specific issue in the country. Of course, the more the country answers, the better and the more useful it will be for Malaysia, because they will know how Vietnam has dealt with the issue, they will know how Bolivia has dealt with the issue, they will know how Belgium has dealt with the issue. And so it is important to really raise awareness among our members that we are all fighting and striving for one common cause, which is dogs.
Excellent. That is such a good point, and it's something that people don't realize actually until they're in the pot being boiled, and then they start looking for help. But you are so right about this working together from the beginning before there's an issue, and actually doing it jointly is a brilliant point. Any parting words, Yves? Anything that you'd like to say, or you think you've covered most?
No, I really would like to thank you for that chat, because, well, first of all, as a person, I appreciate you very much, and you know it, and I like the tone, and I like the way everything was conducted, because I could really speak very freely, and no matter who will listen, I think it is, as I said, there are things which exist, you cannot hide them, you cannot conceal them, and you must be honest and say, yes, you must act like this, or no, you cannot act like that. So I'm very happy because I think that there are areas where, as you said, clarity had to be expressed, and we had to shed light on some areas. Exactly. And if we and I insist, the two of us, we have done a little bit of our job in that, and if it helps some of our US friends, of some of our Bolivian breeders, of some of our Belgian breeders to understand a bit better what the FCI is all about, then we will have reached part of our objective.
Excellent. And you've actually given me some ideas for some follow-up questions. So there might be a part 2, Yves. I mean, you've put yourself into that now.
I'll get psychologically ready.
Yeah, no. I mean, the hope is that this raises up some valid questions, other things that maybe I've not thought of to cover. And hopefully that will, cause us to have a second interview and another chat. And the idea is that we, as you said, is not to hide behind anything, but actually to be very transparent. And that's the whole reason for this series, is for people to understand the FCI directly from the stakeholders, so to speak, without anything being hidden and out there in the public. So thank you so much for. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No. Transparent and objective.
Yes.
I think objectiveness is really important, because, as I said, sometimes if you read too fast, someone complaining or a kennel club complaining, you say, okay, he's right, or no, he's wrong. Yeah. So it really is important to have both versions of the story before doing a recommendation, or before issuing a guideline, or before giving our comment, for example, or opinion, because otherwise the boomerang gets back in your head and you say, oh, I thought I had done a correct job. And in fact, no, you were totally wrong, because you didn't read enough, or you didn't ask for all the elements of the story. So
now I can see why you've been there 27 years, Yves, that the wisdom that you have in dealing with all this, because they are very sensitive issues. They are issues that mean something to these people. And we, as you say, you cannot diminish them or make it smaller, but actually to address every single one, and to make every single person to understand, or to have the right information, or to go to the right channel to understand. But that's fantastic. And that's definitely the right attitude. So thank you, Yves, and thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to chat with me, and to do this for the FCI podcast channel. And we hope to have you back again soon. So thank you again, Yves. Take care.
Real pleasure. I will. Thank you, Gloppy. Bye-bye to all of you. Bye-bye.